Hello, I'm Delea with True North Equestrians, and this is another Soul Horse Sunday interview. And I have the amazing Hillary Schneider here today, and she's going to be giving some perspective on experience with her horses, how they apply and relate and affect her spiritual journey. So Hillary, you want to give yourself a little bit of an introduction?
Sure. So I'm coming to you from British Columbia, Canada, and I'm here on my 80-acre retreat ranch, a Ponarized Retreat Center, and I have a herd of 28 horses here. I do women's retreats. I'm a mentor for other horsewomen and women that are just looking to step into their gifts in a bigger way. And then I also run or founded Horse Medicine Leadership, where I teach and train others to partner with horses in their practice and how they want to support people. And then horses have been kind of part of my, I guess, experience in life from a young girl. I didn't get my first horse till I was 27. So I have kind of a diverse, I guess, background with horses, starting from, children's camps as a kid to going to college to be a horse breeder, to working in the thoroughbred industry, and to kind of ending up where I am now. But I think sort of your question of the horses play in our spirituality, I think the interesting thing for me, and I'm sure, Delay, you have different people that have a different definition of spirituality in terms of how they connect to that word. I think with horses, for me personally, from a young girl, I felt there was a uniqueness of just being around horses, that there was something special that happened when you were in their space and in their awareness. I just felt more connected to myself. That's the best way that I could put it. I felt at home in myself when I was with horses, and that was from a young age. And I think I sort of knew that horses were going to be part of my purpose. So for me, I think spirituality and purpose are very intertwined in terms of this,
Right.
bigger connection to we're here on this planet to embody something, or there's something that we're here to that feels purposeful to us. So for me, there's a big, I think, kind of crossover of like how I define my spirituality with purpose in my own sort of internal journey. So horses, I think, for me, have always been the pathway of kind of finding myself, and I think knowing who I am and that connection to a bigger source in me, so my higher self or my spirit. So I think there's a place where that spirituality for me has also looked very internal, not so much, I think, like an external something out there, but like feeling more connected to my own internal spiritual path and what my purpose has been, and where I feel horses have connected me to that. So I think that's sort of, I've always felt something around that with horses from a young age. I think in terms of like where I am now with it, I think horses have always shown up for me in this place of, deep discovery of my path and who I am. I think certain horses have shown up when I needed to go through a certain lesson, or to sort of awaken me to a certain purpose. And I think in terms of my work, it's really, I think, where horses help us, I think, connect more deeply to ourselves. So it is, I think, a more internal. And I think internally, when we feel connected to that bigger purpose and that bigger spirit, that shows up externally, I think, as well. And everyone has a different version of, I guess, what spirituality means or looks like. So that's how I would kind of define that, or how it's manifested for me.
Interesting that you associate your spirituality with purpose, and I really don't give it that kind of a thought or description, but it actually makes a lot of sense. There is a lot of alignment with that.
Yeah.
And interesting because in your world, you said as a child, you felt like they brought you back internally.
Yes.
And yet then you entered the breeding business and the thoroughbred world,
Yes.
and so I'd be curious to see if you feel like in the bigger industries, if the soul of the horse, or the relationship between the spiritual journey of horses and humans actually carried over into any of those that industry that you were in.
I would say no. And I think part of what I think why I ended up in that industry. So for a couple things, obviously the work that I did now wasn't in existence or I didn't know of it, and I think that I wasn't an equestrian. I didn't grow up with riding. I wanted to be with horses. And I also had this kind of fascination with genetics and bringing life into the world. And I just wanted to find a career with horses. And so when I was 13, my mom ended up doing a interview with Egyptian Arabian breeders, and I went with her, of course, because I was horse crazy. And one of the women that worked there had gone to the college that I had. And so I think it was because I didn't know any other path at that stage. I was 13 years old. I think this work that we're talking about now was not in the mainstream. It wasn't really well known. I'm sure there were people, there's people that have been around longer than I have. So it's not like it wasn't in existence, but I don't think it was broadly in existence. And so that's where I ended up there. But I do think the thoroughbred industry, I think, really clarified for me that I wanted to find a space where the horse could be honored and the human could be honored, and that connection, that deeper connection, could be explored. But no, that was absolutely not a part of the industry. Now I would spend time with the horses at the breeding shed the same way that I had always. I would just go out and be with horses, and I would have these experiences even with horses in the industry. So I think in terms of like that connection with those horses, I still had some profound moments with horses in the breeding shed, but the overall holding of horses in that industry is not,
Right. It's not as honorable towards the,
no,
right.
it's not. No, it's not, it's not. But I think it led me to that desire of like, I wanted to create a space where people could explore that and the horses could be seen that way. So I think it kind of continued to prompt me in, what I've created now.
In the work you do now with coaching and retreats, are a lot of your guests that come for retreats, are they already equestrians, or are they people that just come for a self-revelation, self-growth type of experience? And
Yeah.
if not, how do they get that experience of horses connecting on a soul level while they're there, even if they're not equestrians per se?
Well, I would say, so it's probably about 60-40, 60 being, I think most of the people that are drawn here, they've had some sort of connection or interaction with a horse at some point in their life. And I think they feel the horse energy calling them. They don't always know why, but I think they feel like there's something that I'm feeling called to in that energy. So most of them are not equestrians. I do have horse women, and I would say equestrians probably isn't a word I would use to define the horsewomen that come to me, because a lot of them are not, I think of equestrian, I think of like riders, and I would call the women horsewomen that have had horses in their life, or maybe are coming to it later in life and are looking for, I think, an affirmation of how they feel called to partner with horses that they don't see in the industry. So there's, I think, sort of this deep, sometimes I'm not sure why this is calling me, but I want to explore why horses are showing up in my life and what the meaning behind that is.
Okay, and while they're there, do you find that horses who, I know your horses work with your clients,
Yeah.
and the people at the retreat, do the horses usually single out someone to work with? I know that your horses are all named for what you consider to be their purpose
Yes.
in their life. And so do you have horses that single out people, and you find that what you see as the horse's purpose, they will single out guest individuals in your facility during the retreats to invoke that within them or to heal that within them?
So I think that there's, so my answer to that is sometimes that is the case, yes. And sometimes I think there's an experience with the herd. So I think it really depends on where the person is. And I sort of use more of the terminology of like medicine as opposed to
Right.
purpose in that regard. Like
Right.
every horse has a certain, just like I think we do, we have a certain medicine or a gift. And I think depending on where people are in their lives and what they're journeying through, a certain horse might show up for them. I think that might be reflective of, yes, totally, like what their gifts are and also what they're moving through in their own personal journey right now. And so, yeah, often it is like a horse will feel that resonance to a person. And the way that I do my work is, we're going into their space at liberty. So the horses do have the ability to guide the space. So we do put, and I tell people, we want to pay attention to who shows up for you. Sometimes it's a single horse, sometimes it's multiple horses, sometimes it's the herd. So it kind of depends on where the person is at. Sometimes I have somebody come here for like a 3-day retreat and the same horse shows up for them all 3 days. So I think it really is dependent on where that person is, but I do often put that emphasis of why this horse, why now, and what's significant about that.
Do you find that the horses may pick out someone that's there so that the horse can actually benefit from it? That maybe that human has something the horse is looking for.
I think it's both. So I think there's always a duality of a mutual exchange, but I will say, like, there's sometimes an obvious ask where the horse is asking something from a person and where the horse is wanting to give to a person. And sometimes there's a blend of both at the same time. But I think anytime that we can witness a horse as a teacher and to be present to their wisdom and see them that way, they're receiving a benefit from that. But I have had horses, I think, where a horse and maybe a human has a certain gift that they feel they need to receive from, that they will ask for that. So for sure that shows up. And I think there's a mutual give and take that often manifests in the space too, in the exchange.
Right. Okay, going back to where you said when you were a child, you felt more complete when you were around a horse. And I didn't have a lot of horse experience when I was young. My grandparents had a small farm and there would be random horses there. But the horses were they're kind of manhandled. And that's really my only experience. But I remember when I would be around them, that I would be so much more aware of myself.
Mhm.
And part of that, I'm sure, is just, natural self-preservation instinct. But I didn't know if maybe you wanted to talk a little bit more to the reason I'm bringing this up is sometimes people within my community, they love horses, they respect horses, but they're not sure they see their horse as a part of their spiritual journey.
Right.
And so if we go back to when you were young, when I was young, how would we begin to identify that the horse is part of this soul journey that we're on, or part of our soul work, part of our spiritual
Yeah.
experience,
Yeah.
versus we love horses and we respect them? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I definitely think there's a receptivity to that. And I think a presence, so obviously when we're younger, we don't have the kind of conditioning that we've, been raised in, where perhaps we're not as receptive or present in ourselves, or we can recognize that type of connection. So I think that's more of a product of, I think, human conditioning than anything else, right? We become kind of closed off, or things have happened to us in our life and I think also everybody experiences spirituality in a different way. So what my version of it might look different for somebody else.
Right,
But
right.
I think for most people that have horses, they probably will say their horse is like, they have some sort of an understanding that having a horse is like their therapy to a certain extent. They might not use the same language. But I think for me as a child, I was always a deep thinker. So I think for me, I was naturally inclined to like ask those really like big questions as a kid of like, what's my purpose and why am I here? And I think that's where I kind of felt out of place because nobody else my age was kind of asking those questions. So I think I was sort of a inquisitive, deep thinker kid anyways. And then it wasn't so like, I think when I went to like children's camps, I remember I would just spend my break or my lunch, I just wanted to go sit in the field with the horses. So it wasn't happening necessarily during the riding portion of that, but more of like, I want to just be with horses. And I think it was just this feeling of, I just feel more at home in myself when I'm with them. So there was sort of like an awareness of, I feel different in myself when I'm next to a horse. And maybe that's part of like, you feel seen, you don't feel judged. But I also look at like, I sort of call horses like they're access points for us to, I think, feel more connected to ourselves. And part of that, like you said, might be because it is a large animal and we have to be more present. And so when we're more present in our physical selves, I think we feel things that maybe we don't always feel when we're kind of dissociated or we're living from our head up. So I think as an adult, when we've not been used to being present, that connection might not feel as solid right at the start because we're not as conscious about it. and again, I think everyone has a different interpretation of what spirituality or connection looks like. But I think as kids, you're just open, right? There's sort of this
Right,
natural
right.
openness and receptivity. And you're sort of just very pure in that. But I think I felt like horses were the one being that understood and saw me, where I didn't always feel as a kid who I was, that I received that from any humans. I didn't feel like I
Right.
belonged. And so with horses, it's like, oh, and I didn't know if I had a language for that, right? Like I don't have a language for that, but horses make me feel a sense of belonging and like more connected to myself, or affirmed in that place where I didn't often get that externally in my life with other people.
Right. And it's interesting because when I was a kid, I would just go hang with them, the smell. I mean, most horse people, the smell just does something for you. But also, I did remember I wanted to ride, I wanted to be on them.
Yeah.
And I think that it represents so many things, especially when you're young.
Mhm.
If you're innocent, if you're not getting riding lessons or anything like that, which I didn't do, raised on a farm, but just being astride, you had so much more power. You were
Yeah.
bigger, you were taller, and it was about partnership with something that could take you somewhere that is bigger and stronger and faster than what you are as a child.
Right.
And so I think that even as an adult, I carry that over. I do ride, but I actually spend a ton of time with my horses on the ground, just hanging with them. I go out almost every evening and just hang out with them.
Yeah.
But I think that women also, or people also, will carry some of that idealism or that first experience over with them when they are with their or astride their horse, because it does give you so much more power when you're younger, when you first start riding, and
Right.
therefore you feel like you have more power.
Right.
And I think that even spiritually that applies for me. When I'm with my horses, I'm acutely aware of my own spiritual experience being smaller than I would like it to be. I mean, my whole life I'm just obsessed with spirituality. But when I'm with my horses, I'm aware that I have so much more to learn. So when I was a kid, I was aware of how small I was when I was around the big horse. And yet
Mhm.
spiritually, I still get that association when I'm with my horses, and I'm just always there to learn something. I'm always there to experience what it is that they have to introduce me to, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I find that they still have that influence over me of taking me bigger and farther.
Yeah.
And do people, when you host your groups, do people look at the horse as a conduit towards a self expansion or
Sure.
spiritual expansion?
Yeah, totally. And again, I think sometimes people don't have the language for that, right? They just
Right, right.
feel but yeah, I think for sure if you ask people their experience to it, I'm sure that those are some of the words that they might use to explain it um in terms of what they receive in the exchange with the horses.
Right.
Mhm.
Do you find that people, because you see a lot of this with people that are there for self-discovery and all that, that horses actually open them up to things like forgiveness, whether it's self-forgiveness or forgiveness in events in their life or people,
Yeah.
to open them up to more compassion? Do you see changes in people after they've been with the horses?
Yeah, so for sure I think forgiveness comes up a lot because I think that humans um I think that's one of the big places that we sometimes need to journey is forgiveness. Self-forgiveness, I think, is a big one. And so there's often an actual intention, a ritual I give people around that because it often will show up. And I think part of that is we can't move past something often until we've had that place of forgiveness. And again, it often is forgiving ourselves. I think what I hear most people say around that or the experiences, they feel lighter, like they feel a
Oh,
lightness
interesting.
from
Mhm.
themselves so that the heaviness that maybe they were holding is not there anymore. So there's sort of a lightness and a buoyancy that they feel after having an exchange with the horses, that they can let go of some of those burdens or things that they've been packing around for a while that I think stalls us. It makes us unreceptive and stagnant, and we can't often move forward or receive, or I think be connected to a fullness of who we are, spirituality, when we're kind of holding in those states where I think forgiveness is a powerful medicine for.
Right. Another thing is when we're with horses, actually Melissa Sovey, she's going to be a guest a little later on this, but she, in her book, If I Had a Horse, How Different Life Would Be, she writes, when I'm with my horse, I'm a woman close to the earth. And I think that's another thing, that when we're with horses,
Yep.
they take us out of the frenzy in our head and out of our nervous systems being so charged, and they bring us into a place that is more quiet, and more receptive.
Yeah, and I think grounded. So I know that there's some people who look at spirituality or woo-woo, and there's a negative connotation to that, right? I think we have a perception that spirituality means we're flaky or
Shallow, and yeah.
I what I think that is, and I tell people, I think it's because we hear the word spiritual bypassing happening a lot, where we're using spirituality as almost an escapism from being in ourselves and addressing the things that we need to address. So I think the thing with horses is they're a very rooted physical being. I mean, they're very intuitive and spiritual, but I think there's a high physicality to them that forces us to be grounded. And so what I sort of interpret that as is that close connection to earth, and that grounded and rootedness has us experience our spirituality through the body. And I think be more connected and be more grounded to our experience and not dissociating from it. I think spirituality can sometimes mask as escapism and dissociation because we don't want to deal with things. Whereas I think with horses, there's a place of we need to be in our bodies to be with this animal. And something that I always say to people is, yes, you can have a very intuitive spiritual connection to a horse, but a horse is a horse is a horse is a horse. And we can never forget that, just like we're human. And so we need to be aware of that embodiment of self, just as a horse is going to be physically embodied. And I think it helps those of us that I think spirituality becomes an escapism to, I think, experience spirituality through the body, which I think is connected to earth, because earth is a very physical, grounded, connection point. And I think there's an expansion of, we don't have to leave the body to be spiritual, and we don't have to deny or reject our physical self or world to be spiritual. So I think that often comes into synergy, and I think realignment with horses, because they are such a physical being as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, that it's there used to be a phrase, I grew up in a very religious environment, not to become so spiritually minded you're of no earthly good. And so that's kind of the modern spiritual bypassing that's going on.
Yeah.
And I actually get that, because I would much rather just live there than live here a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I don't think everybody has that challenge, but I do.
Yeah.
I find that horses actually help to give me more physical invitation to stay here and to participate more in earth.
And I find for me, I would label that as acceptance. I think I too also struggled with, why am I in a human body? Like
it's irritating.
Well, it's painful. Like it's painful being in a human body, like it's not a walk in the park sometimes. It's a hard experience. So I find that horses have, I think, given me a way to accept and even find joy and purpose being in a physical body. And I think there's an enhancement and a richness of when you have an embracing of that you can experience a deeper sense of spirit when you're in that, when we're rejecting a part of who we are, whether it's being human or all that comes with it. It's hard for us, I think, to embrace the fullness of our spirituality because we're in denial and rejection of such a big part of us. And I think that's a hard path. I think that's probably one that I see more often with the people I work with, because I would say I work with a lot of spiritual women, and I think it gives them a different connection to spirituality and being a human, and an acceptance and embracing and a joy to that it doesn't have to be this slugfest, right? That we have to slug through life and it's really hard and terrible being a human. And yeah, I'd love to go, I used to say I'm going to fairyland, like I'd love to like hang out there for a while and not be on planet Earth. But I think the horses have given me, and I've witnessed other people, an ability to find that, maybe not all the time, but that we can find that reverence for being in our bodies and experiencing spirituality, I think in the full spectrum of it and not in the rejection of our human selves.
Interesting, because another term I use a lot is between the world of horse and human.
Yeah.
And I often wonder if the horses feel the same need to meet me there. And I think that sometimes they do, not as much as I feel that need, but I think that it seems to me that my horses are willing and happy to go there a lot because they know that I need it. And because it also does give them an experience of being not so much horse, but entering a realm where they see that humans have so many questions. And I actually believe that I think horses and humans are the same. Some are more spiritually evolved, or they have more interest, or they have more interest in earth. But horses that come to me, I'm sure there's some kind of divine ordination that they come to me because they know that I need that spiritual grounding, that spiritual ethereal part of them.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I notice that with my horses, I will try to meet with them and be more deep and more contemplative. And a lot of times they're up for it, and a lot of times they are not. It's like, no, enough of that. We're just here to have this sensual human horse experience of touch and grounding and being together.
Mhm.
So do you find that your horses some days, do they not always want to work? Because the work is self-growth and self-exploration with your retreat center. Do you find that sometimes they don't want to work? I know that I think you let the horses pick who comes up.
Yeah.
Are
And
some horses more inclined to that type of work than others, and others just kind of want to be left alone a little more?
So I would say, again, it depends on where somebody is. Like, I think if it is going to be the most serving for them to be more in that higher plane or meditative state, then that's what they might be invited into. If they're needing to be more grounded and physical, then that's what's going to show up. So I think it just like humans, we have our range, so do the horses. I also look at it's like, where do I need to be recharged or fed right now? So yeah, I think being in that spiritual place of visioning or spirit or meditation, or when we're a little bit more in that different state of being, we need to be fed there. And there's something that we're going to be nourished from that state. And so I think it's more about, where do I need to be right now in my journey and what's going to feed me the most right now? And that will manifest. I mean, is there certain horses where I think that have that more ethereal quality? For sure. And I think that all of the horses have the ability to go there. It depends on where we need to be. And so I think that that would be more of my answer to that. It's like, where do I need to occupy myself right now? Do I need to be more in that, let's say, upper realm of connection? Do I need to bring it through my body? And I think that's dependent on how the horses show up, how they're interacting with the person. I wouldn't pinpoint that not all my horses want to go there, because I've seen every horse be able to go there. I think it just depends on where the person's being invited into. And I think that's part of also, like, for us learning, is how do we know where we need to be in ourselves? Like, what part of our connection to self is going to be the most fulfilling for us in this moment, where we're going to find what we need, nourishment, solution, power. And I think it's learning how to read that. Like, sometimes I do need to go meditate and sit in the field and be in that more meditative spiritual place. Sometimes it needs to happen through my body, where I'm more active and physical. So I think it's kind of knowing how to read that and where to go for the nourishment of that and what to occupy. And sometimes we do need to go there because it helps us with what's happening in our lives. It's like, we're not going to find that in the very mundane. I need to go up to get that perspective and connection. So that's how I would interpret that. I do have horses that tend to be more physical, like are definitely like my root chakra horse, where it's like you need to be in the body. But I would never want to limit a horse and say that they can't go there if that's what's being invited between them and a person.
With my horses, I have the two, and my older mare is very elusive.
Yeah.
It's just who she is. She's like a little ghost horse sometimes. And then Chant, my bay mare, my newer mare, I had her for 4 years. She's very, very upfront and present. It's all about me. And I find that when I'm just being quiet with them, that she will try to, she's very opinionated, very, very opinionated. And I'm actually okay with that.
Yeah.
And I don't mind to negotiate, but sometimes we have to do what the human says because we're around other horses or around other humans. And I
Totally.
find that when I'm alone with her, that she will come up, she's pushy. She always wants me to teat groom or to, do something for her. And I try to get her to just relax and sit back and be a little bit more internal. And my other mare is really, really internal, and she's not as physically interactive as my bay mare. And I look at that as the same way I would look at humans. And some humans are just busy, busy, busy with earth all the time, and other people are so contemplative with spirit. And I find that my horses also exhibit those same types of tendencies and behaviors. And so I'm always trying to get Chant when we're alone, not always, but a lot of times I try to get her to be a little bit more contemplative. And it's an interesting experience asking my horse to shh and just communicate with me. I learned so much from her. She's here to challenge and to help me evolve on more of an ego level as far as everything that I've ever known and believed to be right. And now I have to revisit a lot of those things through her, which is also a form of growth because it encourages me to broaden my perspective and to be more inclusive of interspecies ideas. But it's been interesting that she just doesn't seem to be as interested in more quiet between the worlds communications. And so I have to invite her to do that, whereas Mystic always brings me into her world. So I think that horses and humans, some people are just more given towards internal spiritual contemplation, and others just, they never seem to have a deep thought in their head. It's not a bad thing. I envy those people. It's like, how can you just merrily go through life like that when I feel like I'm always so internal and so contemplative? But it's interesting. I think horses also have the same tendencies that people have. I know that there's been, a big movement the last, several years that horses are these elevated beings. And I'm so glad that we're finally acknowledging them as spiritual consorts and as equals in every way. But I don't think that all the horses are more spiritually, they know all the answers. And I know there's been a lot of information out about that. But what are your thoughts on horses always knowing the right thing? Or do you think they're more like us and they kind of figure it out as they go? They're more ascended as they come into our lives or this lifetime?
Well, I would say, first of all, horses are not like humans. And I think that's what I tell people. A human experience is not the same as a horse experience. So I don't think horses are walking around having the same type of searching that humans are, because they don't have the same operating system. So I don't think we can compare humans to horses in that way. And that's one of the things that I offer to people too. It's like horses don't experience the same things that humans do. So a human experience can't be projected onto a horse. I do believe that each horse has a purpose and a reason why they're here. And like, I look at the horses in my herd, and I think that part of why they're with me is to be a part of what I'm doing in my space and to be teachers, and to that there's a purpose to that. And I think that they have their version of what we do, where I think our souls choose what we're here to learn, and in their version of it. And but I don't know if they have the same consciousness around that, because they don't have the same brain as we do as humans, right? They don't have an ego. And so this is just for my perspective. I don't think that we can compare the two, but I do feel like they have their own journey that they're here to learn, and I don't think it's an accident with the things that they go through in their lives. And I don't think it's an accident, the horses that end up in my space to kind of be part of that collective purpose that we're holding together. And yeah, I think that they're on different stages, the same as we are, like we call old souls or new souls, for sure. I think that there are different qualities that you can feel the same that you would feel with humans. But I don't think they're consciously thinking that. Do you know what I mean? Like they don't have that brain system that we do where we're constantly thinking and judging and interpreting. I think they're existing with that. And I believe this too is for people. We don't know on a soul level what we signed up for. Intellectually, we're not going to be able to wrap our heads around that completely. I think we can be conscious and curious about that. So I guess I don't know if that answers the question, but I think there's an awareness from a deep soul place. I don't think they walk around thinking the same things that we do. And in terms of the answers, I think, like, again, I don't know if horses are interpreting things the way humans are, where we're looking for the answers or solutions all the time. I think they have more of a trust of like what you need will come. And
Right.
And it will, like I always say to people, you can have a question going into the herd and you'll get the answer that you get, and it might be not the answer you expect. And because I think there's a different interpretation of what that quote unquote answer looks like, which there's a lot of ways that can manifest, right? So I think it's just a different perspective of things beyond, I think, our very human limited way of operating and viewing things.
Right.
Yeah.
I think horses aren't futuristic, so they don't look at where their life is going,
No. Yeah.
other than just the moment in their sensual environment.
Yeah.
And I also don't think that they measure things. They don't measure progress. They don't compare how they are with another horse.
No.
Even the horse, we know horses can be competitive, but it's
Totally.
competitive in the moment, not competitive in where they're going in their life.
Totally.
Like humans can be.
Totally. Yeah. They're not obsessive about all of that like we are.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I just think that some animals they came here with more sense of spiritual purpose, just like some humans, and some they're just along for the current ride. And I don't think that, versus what I was talking about earlier, I think that some horses are as evolved as they're ever going to be spiritually, as they want to be, as their capacity, just like humans. And I think that others just have a growing need to always learn more. And I think part of the spirituality with horses isn't necessarily about knowing some sort of divine, but
Yep.
it's about understanding humans.
Totally.
Which would be a tremendous spiritual achievement,
Yeah.
to understand humans.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we go, I know this could go on forever because I could talk about horses and spirituality forever, but is there anything else you want to inject? Otherwise, I'm going to have you just talk a minute about your business and how people can get a hold of you.
Well, I think that's good. I think that's a good place to end. And I'm sure, yeah, we could talk about this for hours.
Okay, well, do you want to just bring up, how people can get a hold of you and maybe just a couple minutes of some of the work that you do?
Yeah, so there's a couple places people can find me. I'm on Women Who Run with Horses on Facebook, Hillary Epona on Instagram, and then also Horse Medicine Leadership, which is sort of our kind of collective community of teaching for those that want to step into partnership with horses the way that, or the equine guided facilitation essentially. And my websites are hillaryschneider.com and horsemedicineleadership.com. I also have my own podcast, the Women Who Run with Horses podcast, and then Horse Medicine Leadership. So the Women Who Run with Horses podcast really is more of that exploration of, some of the things that I've journeyed through in my life, that I've been taught by my horses, or certain horses in my herd. So that has more of a spiritual tone to it. The Horse Medicine Leadership is really, I think, more of educating and talking about how we can honor horses in partnership with us, also in the equine guided facilitation space, and how that can manifest. So those are sort of the two places that, you could, or multiple places you can find me if you're interested in kind of going deeper.
All right. Okay, and I'm Delea with True North Equestrians. If you'd like more information about my work, it's True North Equestrians with an S. So thanks for joining us, and I hope you've enjoyed this session with Hillary Schneider. Thanks so much for joining me today, Hillary.
Thank you for having me.